bring in Mario Mancuso. He is with us from D.C. He is a partner at Fried Frank. He is a former U.S. Undersecretary of Commerce and a former member of President George W. Bush's National Security and Economic Leadership Team. Thanks so much for joining us this morning, Mario. We're glad to have you with us on this story. So does Huawei's intended purchase of 3Leaf, which is a startup, really equate to a national security risk?
Well, good morning, Deirdre. It's great to be here. First, I'd like to say Huawei is in a very difficult position because there's a meta-narrative that it has to contend with. And the meta-narrative is this, and it was alluded to in the opening piece by Lizzie, and that is that China, the Chinese government, has a history of cyber intrusion in the United States. And Huawei, as a telecoms company, has to contend with that when it proposes to make acquisitions in the United States.
So, in other words, the U.S. is not just being nationalistic, that this panel is concerned particularly with Huawei's connections to the People's Liberation Army of China.
That's correct. I mean, first of all, CFIUS, I worked on CFIUS, and I was a CFIUS decision maker for 2 years. The review is, I think, in most cases, quite professional. It's not to say that it cannot get political, but it's not intended to be political. In this particular case, it's really about Huawei, and it's really about the access to the technology that they would have had by acquiring 3Leaf. As Lizzie pointed out, this is really a modest transaction. It's a $2 million deal, a portfolio of some patents, but it really comes upon a history of Huawei in the United States and against the backdrop of this meta-narrative that they have to deal with. I think there are some real takeaways, not just for Huawei, but for CFIUS, but also, and perhaps more importantly, for other Chinese investors in the United States and other foreign investors that want to enter the U.S. market, which, we need liquidity and we want to attract foreign investment. That's in the U.S. interest.
So, Mario, I mean, when you say there's some key takeaways if you're a Chinese company wanting to combine or buy a U.S. company, my guess is you're going to say just follow the letter of the law. We know there were some differences in the way that Huawei, they went out and they sort of didn't file exactly all the paperwork that they should have, right?
I think that's right. I think there's a little bit more than that. I think it depends if you're going to access. If you're a Chinese investor, I think the first thing I would say is don't infer from the Huawei decision that the United States government is skittish about foreign direct investment from all or most other Chinese investors. But generally speaking, if you're a Chinese investor or a foreign investor in the United States, I think you have to realize, particularly if you're investing in certain sectors of the economy, technology, infrastructure, energy, certainly sectors that have a self-identifiable nexus to national security, you need to think about what your DNA is like before the U.S. government, and particularly before this committee. This is why it's important to be strategic about the approach. And over time, it's also important to mention most transactions don't get notified to CFIUS, and most transactions that in fact do get notified to CFIUS actually get approved by the U.S. government. That said, it's important to be strategic about it and not ad hoc about it, and to be thoughtful about it.
Mario, we thank you so much for your time. Mario Mancuso joining us there from Washington, D.C.